and welcome to today's episode of Ubuntu Channel Zambia. We are talking sports today. Today's Friday, and as usual, we talk sports. So today we have a very special guest that we're featuring on the show. We're talking to Franklin Malambo, a coach and also a football analyst. He's known for having coached Mpulungu Haba as one of his teams, and also, he's worked in Southern Province. He's now in Northern Province. He's been on the Copper Belt. He's been in Lusaka, so he's a well-traveled man. Franklin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good evening to you, and good evening to everyone that's joining us. That was quite a long introduction. I'm glad to be here, and hoping that we can add some value to the discussion this evening.
I thought the introduction was not as rich as you expected.
No, it was good enough. It was good enough. At the end of the day, I think even just one piece of history is okay. But the most important is, I think, what we can do today and going forward. So thank you so much for your kind words. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to the discussion that we're about to have.
Okay, Franklin. As we get into the show, we'll be talking late national team collapse that have caused quite a stir among football lovers. We also have, the transfer window is open, so we also talk about transfer news that is happening, gossips, and the possible done deals that have been happening. But before we get into that, can you just briefly tell us about yourself? Who is Franklin?
Like most people that are joining us now, I'm just someone that likes the game. At the end of the day, then I think my interests in the game have seen me do coaching. My interest in the game have seen me do some analysis, as well as being an instructor or educator, as the term that is being used now. I think I've coached from as far back as 2012, 2013. My coaching journey has seen me handle schools football. I've done academy or grassroots football. I've done the lower leagues for FAS. I think the highest league I've worked in so far has been the second tier of Zambian football, which is the National League. Like you said earlier, I was with Mpulungu Haba for about a year plus. Initially, my title there, or my role there, was that of the technical director. But then, things having changed along the way, we had a few changes. Then I think for the last 10 games of the season before last season, I led the team, lost 2 over the last 10 games. I think we got 4 wins, 4 draws. But then, while that form could have saved us, I think it was too late. We couldn't stay up in the league. Before then, I think my other notable involvement, I think, was sometime back in Choma with the team that was called AM Welding. I think we played Division 2 back then, and then I think by the end of that season, I left the team before the end of the season, due to some other commitments. But I think the positive is that by the end of that season, the team got promoted, and I think that's the slot that we all know that Beautiful came to buy on this part of Southern Province. Outside that, I think I do a lot of analysis, like you said earlier on, just out of passion, really. I've always thought that look, we can all do analysis in different ways, but at the end of the day, we are all interested in making this game move. Outside football, I do a bit of work as an accounting personnel because I've got training in accountancy as well. So, a family man as well. I've got a wife and 2 kids. I think as far as introductions go, that's just about it, really.
Okay. Wow, that was interesting. So I was listening to it very attentively. Yeah.
Sure.
So we get into business now. So
Yeah.
Chipolopolo head coach Aujosa Hasanovic, is preparing his lads. He initially picked a 23-man squad for the upcoming COSAFA Cup. Majority of all of the players are locally based from the Super League, and then late on, as the team reported for camp, we started seeing names coming up of young stars, not from the National League, but from provincial leagues, being called on to join the national team as they prepared for what? As they prepared for COSAFA tournament, and they held their first training at Baka Academy in Lusaka, and a total of 5 young players reported for training. We had 2 boys from Atletico Lusaka. That was King Mutandwa, scored 17 goals. We also had Charles Majapa, a very highly talented midfielder. He played for the Zambia under-17. We also have one young boy who's coming from MC Galaxy, that is Hapin Siku. He's their captain. He's also closing in on a move to a National League side now. Then we also have 2 young boys that have been called up. So these names have not yet been published, like online or anything, but Lucky Mainza and one other boy, Brian Masania, something like Brian Masania. Both boys are from Chilanga Stars. So these two boys from Chilanga Stars went to Zesco United for trials, and then they recently came back. They just went for about 4 or 5 days to be assessed, and they recently came back. And when they came back, they started training with their team and played the provincial Lusaka Province Cup. And after that, they've been roped into the national team for possible assessments. So what is your take on that?
It's a dicey situation. At the end of the day, we may just be speculating, but I think it's important to understand or get it from the coach himself. What you have gathered from what he has said is that he called them for 2 things, mainly for assessment and also for them to understand what really happens at the national team camps. I think coming back from, if we go back to a few years back, I think this is not really a new phenomenon in Zambia. You remember at some point, Heverena called a certain Godfrey Ngwenya into the national team camp, not really because he was going to be a key player, but I think for him to understand what goes on there and possibly, get some game time. We know where Godfrey Ngwenya is today. He's one of the key players, one of the most important players at Power Dynamos and even in the Zambian league itself. Not too long ago, maybe just under 2 years ago or so, you saw Micho for a certain Joseph Sawogo Banda to the squad to also maybe I think just help him learn the ropes. This is something that has happened over time, but I think the major issue this time around has been maybe the number of youngsters that have been called to the squad. We're talking about initially 3 and now rising to 5. For me, there's nothing wrong in teaching players what really happens at the squad, because this is one thing that I'll tell you for a fact. Even before a national team camp is called, I think the coach already knows who is in his plans, who is going to play. But then the invitations to the squad or to the camp are just to come and be sure of certain things and trying to work on a few combinations. And so trust me, even by the time he was calling those youngsters, I'm pretty sure I was fairly certain he was already sure with the players that he was going to go with to camps. Maybe the other way of looking at it is, when you're calling up a national team camp or when you're calling players to camp, what are you looking for? What you want to see? Among the first things that a coach would want to see, maybe if there's a squad that has been called before, and this is say maybe a second or a third one, is that he's going to be looking for improvement. And so sometimes you're going to see a few new faces coming in for the sake of improvement. Are those youngsters, were they able to put improvement or maybe add improvement to the team? Well, that's not a question that we can answer now. Posterity might probably answer that question for us. Another thing that you would be looking at sometimes is just to offer a different dimension. Look, it's possible that all the players in camp were probably offering the same thing, and maybe a youngster and a non-youngster, is highly unpredictable, probably offers something that is different. But at the end of the day, for me, those call-ups only make sense simply because the coach has said he's got them there for 2 things: to assess them and, most importantly, to give them a feel of what goes on at a high level, which for me, there's nothing wrong in mentorship. It's a way of mentorship, really.
Yeah, so thank you for that point. But we had a section of football followers, football writers, and some possible officials of some club who said, in as much as the coach had extended the invites to these young players from provincial leagues, why didn't the coach look at invite players such as Andrew Piri, who was the highest scoring Zambian in the national league? He plays for Musa,
Yeah, from
very good
Moza. Yeah.
center forward. Yeah, we have Richard from Lumwana Radiants, marvelous midfielder.
Yep.
We have
Yeah.
Chaniza Zulu,
Yeah.
who practically
From
delivered the
Napsa.
APSA Cup
Yeah.
to the APSA Stars. Why did the coach
Yeah.
have a look at those players?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky for me to take, because like I said earlier on, at the end of the day, the coach has his own way of thinking. But then maybe what might come to his defense is probably the fact that maybe in his team he already has someone that offers what Andrew Piri is offering. Maybe in his team he already has someone that does what Richard is already doing. Chaniza Zulu has been on the fringes of the national team from the days of Mitchell. So I think it is known what he's also able to offer. And so maybe the coach would argue that he already knows what those players are offering, and he already has a similar quality in his squad, and so would rather look at other players. Well, that's just one school of thought. But then to be sure about everything, maybe only himself would give us the best answer. However, one thing I've always known about national team collapse is that they're never really going to satisfy everyone, because everyone is going to have an opinion. I also heard one school of thought which was saying there were probably even better players that were playing at the National League playoffs. I was privileged to watch the National League playoffs. If you asked me how many players from there I would recommend to even just a Super League side, maybe maybe 4 or 5, but then that would mean I'll probably even be too kind. I'm sorry to say. Because if you watch the National League playoffs, that was supposed to be an idea of the National League itself, but unfortunately the quality there may not really have been good enough. One is going to say they are getting boys from an academy, for example, but trust me, having seen some of those boys first and then what they are able to do, then you begin to understand why one would actually want to put them on a mentorship program. They may not be ready for top level competition now, but then the flashes that they show tell us that we must manage them well. The problem in Zambian football over the last few years has been that we've done pretty well as far as the young sides are concerned, but then I think handling them from the ages of between maybe 17 or 20 up to 23, 24, that has always been a challenge. And so a bridge like this or a window like this brings an opportunity for players to burst through that ceiling of youth football and get into top level competition. But then you can only get such a call up if you're exceptional. I would not really be surprised if I hear of Majapa going outside the country soon enough. We know that King Mtwanda already had the run when he went to Israel. Well, it may not have maybe paid as well as would have been expected, but then the fact that he made that move, having initially been playing just in Division 3 in Central Province, tells you about the loads of skill and talent that this boy has. I'm not trying to justify anything here, but the reality is that sometimes when players are exceptional, you must give them a run, just give them a feel of what happens at the top. But back to what I said earlier on, I'm sure the coach already has a team in mind, the senior players that he already picked from his first selection, and sure those are the players that is going to go to the tournament.
Okay, how about Hosea Silva? Do you think his age is not in favor of the coach project?
Oh, sorry, could you come again with that? I think the network was breaking.
Yeah. So he did exceptional job from Eagles. Was a key player for being good. He has continuously left out. Due to his age, is one of the contributing factors he's being out.
Yeah, interesting one. I think you're talking about Hosea Sulimba. I may not have really heard you, entirely, but I think you're talking about Hosea Sulimba. It's a bit surprising for me as well. Trust me. When I came up with what I called my team of the season, Hosea Sulimba was there chiefly because of the performances that he put in week out for Green Eagles. And if you're going to call a national team based on statistics, for example, then surely Hosea Sulimba should be able to make it. Even if you're going to call it based on a few other qualities that may not be, quantified in terms of statistics, then he's still going to make it. But then I think it's one of those where you say, it leaves you wondering what really the coach's thought process could be. Previously, I had been privileged when Mitchell was coach that I think I established a relationship with him, and sometimes I would ask some of these questions, even off the record, what's the thought process behind this move? Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to that level with the current coach, but I hope to get to that level so that I can actually ask some of these questions. And for me, I think it's also a challenge to some of the colleagues that are in the media, some of the colleagues that attend these press briefings. I believe you attend some of those too. I think this would be a very interesting question to ask the coach to actually understand, his reasoning behind. Because if you look at the players that are in the squad, maybe, in comparison to what Sulimba brings, box for box, if you begin to tick certain boxes, maybe some of them may fall off, he may remain standing, but it would be interesting to know what the coach's thought process was. But trust me, even when I did my team of the season, he was one of those that made that made the cut.
Okay. So I'm asking you two questions. One as a coach and one as an analyst. So as a coach,
yeah,
you're tasked to pick a team. Prince Mumba or Sia Silumba? Who's your pick? Just a name. No reason, just a name.
Based on last season's performances, I would go for Sia Sulimba.
Okay, thank you. And as an analyst, so this is coming from a point that you just raised, where you encourage people that are in the media to ask some of these questions to the coaches of any team. Do you think the coaches, among the coaches and the media, the football writers and other people, are open enough or honest enough to reveal certain information to the public? Do you think they are open enough?
I'll answer that as a coach. Unfortunately, no. Sometimes giving out certain pieces of information may not really be the best, chiefly because, look, sometimes writers will twist things. Sometimes people are going to misinterpret what you say, and so you need to be very careful with what you give them. Sometimes it depends on the situation. If, say, it's a tricky situation, really. But then at the end of the day, I think coaches are going to give you answers which they feel are best suited for the moment. Ideally, one would want to give what they think is satisfactory, but at the end of the day, for fear of being misinterpreted or maybe misunderstood, coaches may not really give you the truth as you want to have it. So they will give you what they think is consumable by everyone out there.
Okay, because look, when I compare our own Zambian football, like journalistic space, where you go to briefings, press briefings, ask the coaches. So majority times, okay, for me, I'm a big fan of one-on-one interviews with coaches. I feel a coach should be guided on what to say, because for me, as somebody who is in sport, there are things that I want to hear, and I know the coach has those things, but the context of how he says them may not give me what I want. So sometimes is it to such. Is it advisable to do that?
So could you just say that part again? Is it advisable to do what?
Is it advisable to like advise a coach to say, okay, as I ask you about your team's performance, I want you to specifically look at these areas of your team. Is it advisable to do that?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you are considered to be, you may be in a different profession, but the fact that you have been asked or you have been tasked to discuss football matters with the coach, it means you have a certain level of understanding of the game. And so, look, I think it's just important that we respect each person's opinion, and that's what they are. They are just opinions. At the end of the day, you may make a suggestion to the coach, but he still makes the final decision. Does he consider what you're telling him, or maybe he doesn't? There are certain countries we know where national team call-ups, for example, are hugely influenced by the media, and the coach is going to listen. Not because it's just the pressure from the media, but because sometimes a journalist will show a certain level of understanding of the game. And let's not forget, sometimes journalists or people that work in the media also have primary knowledge or elementary knowledge about the game, which at the end of the day becomes crucial to the decision making process. And I think there's nothing wrong in making a suggestion to the coach, but at the end of the day, he makes the call. Though I think journalists or sports people must be careful in how they maybe phrase their questions or how they bring about their opinion. It should sound like an opinion and not really like you're trying to impose something on the coach, and there maybe coaches will feel undermined or feel you think they are probably not good enough. But I think the way you shape it or the way you frame it will surely make one be warm to you or unfortunately be cold to you.
One last question as an analyst. Do you think Zambian football is toxic?
From which angle?
from an analyst angle, like you speak as an analyst. Do you think Zambian football is toxic?
I'm trying to understand your question. Is it toxic between analysts or the football itself?
Not the football itself, but the environment being created around football.
Quite frankly, I'm not sure, because for me, all analysts or all people in the media, I look at them colleagues. As a matter of fact, I'm actually thankful that they've allowed me to work in their space, because you know that apart from this video analysis that we are doing, sometimes I do write, and so I'm thankful that actually people have allowed me into their space, up to a point of even writing in two national newspapers. But that aside, at the end of the day, where there are people and people are working, there's always going to be difference in opinions. And for me, what matters is how you come out of that, or what angle you decide to see. So while one would see negativity, maybe another one would see that maybe it's a positive push towards doing what is correct. But at the end of the day, it's about everyone pushing each other to do the best that they can do, and it's only doing the best that would help Zambian football move forward. So for me, the environment, toxic, non-toxic, I think that's secondary. For me, it purely depends on how one wants to interpret it. But for me, it's okay. It's a good space. Obviously, we're not going to agree with everyone, but that's normal, really. If you're going to agree with everyone, or if everyone is going to like you, then you have a problem.
Okay, so over the national team issues, just one last question is, Asanovic has been in charge of just 2 competitive matches with the national team, one against Ivory Coast and then one against Comoros here in Zambia, winning that one probably at the death of that match. So he has come under heavy criticism, firstly for his team selection on match day, and then secondly, he's come under heavy criticism for the call-ups for the young boys that he's called up. Do you think this coach is a coach who has been given a 4-year contract? Do you think, looking at his team selection and the picking of those young players, does he have that project in mind of rebuilding the national team, or is he on course to deliver what Zambians want?
First thing, I think we should not be misled by the 4-year contract. The 4-year contract is still performance-based. If the performances are not good enough, then I think both parties can decide to part ways. His selections, in a way, indicate that there's an eye on the future as well. While the present matters a lot at the moment, but then there's also an eye on the future. And that is why sometimes you see a balance in terms of the age spectrum. You have players that have played for a long time, and also players that are just trying to learn the ropes. Remember earlier on what I said is that in Africa, the problem we've had is that we fail to handle the transitions from one team and on to another. There are times when a team, you find maybe all players are peaking at the same time, and at the end of 3-4 year run, then the whole team has collapsed, and then you have to start to rebuild. But then at a time when you have some senior players in a squad, I don't think there's anything wrong in calling in 3-4 youngsters to begin to learn the ropes, so that the transitions are handled better. Because remember, when the senior players phase out in the next 2-3 years, who's going to be playing? We have to go back to the same youngsters, and so we need just to get a good balance out there. Is he a coach that strikes me like one that is up for a project? Yes, he does. But how far it goes in the project, we wait and see. And just maybe last one. You know, call-ups to the national team are not just made by by the coach. There's a technical committee, you know, that looks at player selection, by the way. And so a technical committee is going to make recommendations. And you know, at times it's up to the coach to say yes, and maybe up to the coach to say no. But for me, what matters most is, are we consistent in our call-ups? Because it's the call-ups that are going to tell us if we are building towards something, and it's our call-ups that are going to tell us if we have no direction whatsoever. Are there some names that have become common in some of these selections in the recent past? Yes, they are there, starting from the friendly series that were played in Turkey, and also in the qualifiers that were played, is it last month or the other month? We are beginning to see a certain level of consistency. And for me, that's what matters. Project or no project, it's a consistency in terms of selection in the key positions. And once you get that, then you know that you are building something that is going to serve you well both at present and in the future.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments and giving a clear light on the collapse and what is happening around Zambian football and the COSAFA. And now we go into an area where, you know, transfer news. You know, the transfer window opened last month. It will close the next month, August, as the league resumes. So we have some deals. We had Zesco United announcing that they had signed a total of 6 players, with the latest being Kelvin Kapumbu from Zanaco and Jackie Ngulube, left back from Green Buffaloes, who was signed on a 3-year loan. Those are like the latest signings that were made. But in the background, we have done deals. We have about 25 done deals so far. Players that have signed, and it's official that these players have joined, like Red Arrows, who have signed 6 players, majority from Kafue Celtics. We have Buffaloes, who have also signed about 6 so far. We also have about 3 to 4 more players that will join Green Buffaloes so far. What are your thoughts on the transfer activity that is happening around? Are we on course? Is it? Can we compare to the last season? Is this one better than the last?
It's interesting. Trust me, I'm a fan of transfers being completed early. I like transfers that are done before preseason hits high gear, because that's when you're going to prepare a team. I don't really like transfers that are done a week or 2 before the start of the season, because preseason would have passed. The specifics of the game model would have been done by then, and so sometimes players find it very hard to adjust. Am I impressed with what has been happening so far? The numbers look impressive, but I think for me it goes beyond the numbers. What matters for me the most is why are clubs getting into business? What are they trying to achieve in terms of by the signings that they have made? Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind when a club is making a signing is the issue of depth, which is both about the quality and quantity. We have seen a lot of quantity being signed. I think the quality can only be defined by what improvement a team is trying to make, or the thought process behind what a team is trying to make. I'll give an example. Red Arrows, signed Brian Chidimina, a young man that I know pretty well, having, I think, coached him about 4 years ago now in Chirondo, the dust pitches of Chirondo. I know he's a good right back. Maybe comes in as cover for Benedict Chepeshi. Probably the line of thought there would be Chepeshi would be loaded in the Champions League, and so he needs some relief whilst playing in the Super League. For me, that is a good enough replacement. I also know that Green Buffaloes have signed Kasongo, the goalkeeper from from Celtic. We know that part of the problem that Green Buffaloes had last season was the goalkeeping department, and those are some of the transfers that for me are exciting, because you can tell that the club is trying to add depth, but not just depth, but also address the issue of quality. The kind of transfers a team makes is able to either take them to a higher level in terms of improve them, or at times may even make them worse than they may have been before. Because the challenge is that for especially players that have already been playing in the Super League, those that are signing them already expect them to go and make an impact and maybe have them to become key players. But imagine signing a key player or a supposedly key player who fails to live up to the billing, then it becomes a problem. Yes, the numbers are okay as it seems, but I think we could have done even much more. Because trust me, I know that all clubs want to make signings, but like I said, I'm not a fan of signings that are done 2 weeks before the start of the league. Signings must be done now before preseason hits high gear, so that when you begin to look at the specifics of the game and when you begin to look at certain intricacies in the game, you already have a full squad. So I think that would be my opening submission.
And then we let's narrow down to single teams. So first we talk about Power Dynamos. Power Dynamos signed Owen Tembo, holding midfielder from Konkola Blades. They also signed Willard Mwanza from Konkola Blades. How do you rate these two signings for Power Dynamos?
Very good signings. I'll start with the goalkeeper. I think I've seen him firsthand. I faced Konkola Blades twice the season before last. He was in Go there. Last season, I also watched him when they played in the Super League. Well, they may have gotten relegated, but I think there's no doubt about the quality that he possesses. Even when you look at his frame, he's your ideal modern goalkeeper. I think he's fairly tall. May not be as tall as yourself, but I think he's tall enough to be able to hold goals for Power Dynamos. The problem for Power Dynamos last season, I think, was that there was a lot of inconsistency in terms of their goalkeeping pattern. One day you'll have a Kapunta, another time you'll have a Lawrence Mulenga. Yes, toward the end of the season, Lawrence Mulenga became like the first choice, but at the end of the day, I don't think he had enough competition. I think for me, Sebastian Mwange is out of the picture. So I think they did well to bring in Willard Mwanza. Of course, that is an area that needed reinforcement. Owen Tembo as well, defensive midfielder, one of those for me that is able to play as a deep line playmaker, because he's got a good range of passing. Is he good enough for Power Dynamos? I think he is. But for me, the key thing for Power Dynamos in the present window is that can they try and find ways of finding more creative players, but also finding a player that is consistently going to give them goals. While they may have signed Brian Muller, in the mid-season transfer last season, the problem is that we know that he's injury prone. And so if you're going to win a particular league, you need a player that is able to play week in, week out and be able to deliver the goals. So for me, I think the two pieces of business they've done in Willard Manza and Owen Tembo are good deals. But can we also see them sign a striker that is going to give them goals week in, week out? If that is not done, I hope that their health department has done a good job on Brian Muller, and also that the coaches are going to manage his loads so that they can get the most out of him during the season.
Okay. Yeah, very good and insightful opinion there. So we go to Red Arrows. Red Arrows have signed 6 players, and what is intriguing on those 6 players is that Prosper Chiluya was on loan at Red Arrows for 2 seasons before finally completing a permanent transfer to Red Arrows. And then the other players that have joined Red Arrows, the other players that have joined on loan. So Red Arrows have not signed permanent players, but they have signed players on loan. Do you think they have done good business for them as a club? Because the players, when the loans expire, they'll need to get other monies and start looking for other players, because Celtic may want their players back. But if the players attract interest from other clubs, the players will be free to go. So do you think Red Arrows have done good business there?
In the immediate, we'll say it's good business as far as the football side is concerned. But off that, it may not really be good business, because, like you are saying, they've got about 4 or 5 players on loan. Unfortunately, they can only probably have them only for this season. Maybe some may extend to next season. But the long and short of it is that ideally, they should also be looking to sign players that are going to be permanent. However, in terms of the quality that they've signed, is it the right quality? I think it is okay. It is going to help them, especially toward the charge of maybe retaining the championship, because the players that they've signed are players that were playing regularly in the Super League last season. So these are boys that have been tried and tested. The challenge for me is that they are not signing a permanent deals, which for me, doesn't really sit well, especially that sometimes I'm one that wants to look at the near future, if you would say that. So what happens at the end of the season when all these players are maybe recalled by their parent club, then they have to start afresh. Unfortunately, it's not really the best position to be in for coaches. But maybe in their defense, they could be, some of these issues are beyond the coaches. It's about the structure that is in the club. It's also about the policies that are in the club. And so maybe at present, some of the policies are not really enabling them to sign players on a permanent deal. But for me, the big thing about Arrows now is that they've lost a very key player. Their player of the season, one that was arguably maybe even player of the season for the whole, in the whole league, that is Trezor Shiwawa. How do they go on and replace him? A player like him is not really easy to replace because he's your modern day centre back. He's a ball playing centre back. He's good in the tackle. He's good in the distribution, effective in both boxes, in defense and also in attack. How do they replace a player like him? For me, that becomes a very key question for them to answer as they go into CAF as well as the local league.
Yeah, so Red Arrows had 4 key centre backs last season. They had Elvis Bisson, Cameroonian. They had Trezor Shibwabwa. They also had Alan Kapila at the heart of defense. And then we also had this one young boy uprising. He's formerly of Blue Arrows in Livingston. Came to Red Arrows and made a very big impact at the club, but wasn't really consistent. He wasn't being given much game time. But in games that Red Arrows were short in defense, this boy was being played as left back at some point. He also played as the right back. So Trezor leaves. He just bid farewell today to his club. He's completed his switch to Sekhukhune United in South Africa. And they've brought in Richard Daka, one boy, a Lusaka boy, highly talented. He went to Luapula province, played National League, and then came back to Lusaka to Celtic, and then played the Premier League football Celtic. Do you think he's an able replacement for Trezor Shiwawa?
He's a player that whose quality is undoubted. I watched him at Celtic, but then what it means when you replace one player with another whose qualities are different is that you must also change the way you play. And so, in a lot of ways, Arrows could be possibly looking at changing the way they play. To their credit, I think they've only lost one key member of their backline. They still have the other 3 that he played alongside. I think he had a good partnership with Alan Kapila toward, especially in the second half of the season. Is he able to partner with the new player that is coming in? Possibilities are there, or are they going to go back to using Bisson? I highly doubt that. But maybe in certain games they may want to use him because of his experience. Is Zulu good enough? Yeah, I think he is. But then we wait and see. The challenge with football is that it's like an exam which you write, then you only learn the lesson later on. That's the difference between football and all other things. So it's going to be job on training. He's going to be writing the exam and learning the lesson at the same time. If he's able to learn accordingly and adjust accordingly, then good signing for Arrows. But then if he's not able to take the exam accordingly, then it becomes problems for them. But at the end of the day, we trust the brains that they have there in terms of the coaching personnel and the players that they are scouting. And so I think they think he's going to be good enough in their system. We wait and see, really. It's one of those where we say, let's wait and see.
So yeah, one other key player that Red Arrows have signed is Thomas Zulu, a holding midfielder. Remember this boy? This boy played for the Zambia under-20 with the likes of Francisco Mwepu, Klings Kangwa, Edward Chilufya, and all these other boys. He played for the Zambia under-17 also. So in the wake of his career, he was pushed to Nkwazi FC on loan, where he went. For me, he was fairly unsuccessful in his spell at Nkwazi. Now he's gone to Red Arrows. Do you think he will manage to make an impact at Red Arrows?
He should be able to. Sometimes players are going to fail in some teams, not really because they are bad players, but maybe they are not just the right fit. Sometimes in some teams and their policies may not really be the right fit for certain players, and so that's why sometimes failure is a relative term. It really depends on what factors you are going to look at or focus on. The key thing for me is that he's going to Red Arrows where there's Oswald Mtapa. This is someone that coached him in the junior national team, so this is someone that really knows him. Beyond that, he's also moving to Arrows with players that he's been playing with at Celtic, so the environment might be new, but then some of the key elements in the environment are not new. These are friends that he knows with, and that's a key component as far as getting the best performance from a player is concerned. And so that puts him in the right position for me to go there and perform. That's why I don't really have doubts about these players that they have signed from Celtic. Because by the way, they are well schooled. They are very gifted players actually, and really understand the game as far as the basics are concerned. So I think he's going to make it. He might not have made it at Nkwazi, like I said, due to a number of factors. But I think there's a favorable environment and fertile ground for him to make it at Arrows.
Okay, so you talked about their level of talent and all of that. Do you think what these boys possess is enough to help Red Arrows reach as far as the group stages of the Champions League?
Um, on that, I'll get back to the analogy of the exam. You write the exam and learn the lesson at the same time in football. We wait and see. But I think for me, the thinking behind the deals that Arrows have done as far as getting the players from Celtic is concerned is that I think they'll still go with the bulk of those that played in the Confederation Cup last season to play in the Champions League. They knew some of these players they've signed as backup to play in the CAF, sorry, in the local league. But like I said, Leon, there's no doubt about the quality of these players. They may be new to the stage in terms of CAF football, but then depending on who they are paired with, then they're able to break through. I mean, we've seen upstarts sometimes even in the UEFA Champions League, a new guy and just takes everyone by storm. Maybe in the Champions League, it's happened before in the African Champions League. A new guy takes everyone by storm. So we really wouldn't be surprised to see that happen.
Yeah. So one gossip that happened a couple of weeks ago, news came out that Conrad Luchanga had joined Red Arrows. His club, Prison Leopards, came back a day after the news came out, and said, "No, this player is not hasn't joined Red Arrows. He's still a Leopards player." And actually attached a piece of content that was said that these are words that were coming from the player himself.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Was it a good move? If had it materialized, do you think it would have been a good move for Conlight?
For the player, maybe not. Chiefly because look, he's hardly settled in the last 3 or 4 seasons. He's had a new team every campaign, and just a time when things begin to look bright for him, making a move, it may not really have been the best. Because I think for a long period, maybe in the last 5 years, his performances at Prison Leopards last season were like vintage Conrad. That's the Conrad that we knew that broke onto the scene about, is it 6 years ago or so? And so maybe making the move would not really have been the best. But then this leads me to saying that I think Arrows still need to strengthen as far as the attack line is concerned. When the season ended, I remember having a conversation with someone that closely follows Arrows, and I think I'd said that they'll need extra backup at the centre back position. They need extra backup in the holding midfield row, and also they'll need the extra backup at the top. And look, Conrad would have offered something different from Ricky. Ricky is the kind of striker that will probably feed on balls that are threaded into the channels or throw balls, and on he goes to finish. But Conrad offers you something different because he's able to get involved in the play. He's even able to play on either flank. Even when you want to go with a front three, he's able to play across the entire front three. He would have offered something different to them. But was it going to be a good move for him? Maybe not, considering that it's just about finding his feet at Prison Leopards.
Okay, so we also take a look at one player Muiza Siwale. Muiza Siwale, a highly talented boy,
Yeah.
went to trial in Austria, that was Red Bull Salzburg, and also I think Sturm Graz, where he trialed and then came back. And then he was sent on loan at Red Arrows, a very unsuccessful loan, and then came back to Celtic, rediscovered his form in the previous season, and then now he's been loaned to Green Buffaloes. Do you think? What do you think about the boy, his potential, and how talented he is? Do you think he has the zeal to make it?
It's a trick one. Uh, like I've said about most of the boys at Celtic, I think they are well schooled, they are well trained, they are well coached, and that has helped them to bring or to show the quality that they have. That's why they get some of those, invitation for trials, and also that is why the club like Red Arrows came calling for his, for his signature. Is it 2 seasons ago? His role may not really have been successful, but I think he was still in the learning process. We saw what he was able to do at Celtic in the just ended season. Does he have the talent to make him thrive at Green Buffaloes? Yes, he does. But I think for me, the key thing is for Green Buffaloes, who's their next coach? Do we know who their next coach is? Yes, there's speculation about one or two names being mentioned, but the key thing will be how much does this coach trust the youth players? Because they've made a lot of youthful signings actually, and I think even maybe today they should have completed one deal for another young striker. The key question for me about Musa Sowale making it at Buffaloes or not will be about who's the coach that is going to come in and what are the ideas that the coach is going to bring. But if Buffaloes are still going to be the same, first route football kind of team, it doesn't really favor players like Musa. Player like him is favored by a system that puts the ball on the ground. He's favored by a system that wants to knock the ball around. And so as long as they do not go for such approaches, the young players are going to struggle. But then if they go for an approach like that, that involves ball retention, ball rotation, moving into spaces, putting the ball on the ground, then surely he should be able to thrive. If not, then it could be another disastrous time out on loan.
So we also had earlier this week we had news that Green Buffaloes had let go about 12 players. Others were transfer listed, others were released, others were sent on loan. So earlier on, there were issues when the initial statement that Green Buffaloes brought out, because they had said that these players have been released. But the majority online followers of the club say no. If you release certain players, you cannot hold on to players that you've released. So these guys are soldiers. So you need to use new terms. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, it's just one of those. It happens. I think at times, I'm sorry to say, but at times maybe we may not use the correct terms. Sometimes we may know what we want to put out there, but maybe not know the correct terms to put out there. I was quite surprised to see that the statement said that players had been released, but those that wanted them needed to go through Buffaloes. It baffled me a bit, but I think a few minutes later on, that error was corrected. There's nothing wrong in transfer listing players, and I think if you had seen the clip that I did this morning, or is it yesterday, I think I spoke in part about transfer listing players. Depending on which way you want to go, sometimes you can transfer list players and leave it, to open that whoever wants them will come through. Sometimes you may even put a minimum fee that you are looking at. Because remember nowadays, even for a loan, a fee is paid. Sometimes, and the guys being soldiers, obviously people are just going to get them on loan. But then for the services that they are going to offer, maybe a fee could come in, but then it shouldn't be exorbitant, because at the end of the day, someone is not in your plans, so you might as well let them go. But I think there should be a lot of wisdom in who you let go and how you structure some of their deals. The clauses that you put in their loan deals, for example, are you able to recall them at any particular time when you need their services? Things like that. So yeah, it was just one of those. I think it was just an error on their part, which they corrected, and I hope that now everything is back to normal and players can move freely.
How about the quality of the players let go? Do you think they've lost some quality in the players that they let go?
For me, the issue around Buffaloes is I don't know who's making the decisions because they don't have a head coach.
No,
So how
they
sure are we
have a
that
head coach.
when did they make an appointment?
No, actually, Green Buffaloes is being led by coach Australia Mwemba. He took charge of the last games after coach Chinama was let go. He took charge of the other games, and we also had rumors, but the rumors haven't matured. It's been over 2 months since some names
Yeah.
have been popping up, and by now it could have been clear on which coach should have come in, because had they had the solid business with the coach, the coach could have come in and started making his own signings. But as it stands now, the players that are being let go by coach Australia Mwemba. So
Okay.
as
So
it
it means
stands, coach Australia
we
Mwemba
go
is the
by the
head coach.
assumption that we go with the assumption, but then they haven't confirmed him as the head coach. They haven't made it public. So that's why I was saying they don't have a head coach. But if we go with the
Are you
assumption that it's
waiting for
going
an
to be,
official statement?
yes, professionally, that's how they should go about it, because they told us that it was just going there in caretaker capacity or whatever term they may have used. But then, on a serious note, if they are sure that it's going to be the coach, then we might, okay, then we are going to back his cause. Some of the players they released, I saw a Gift to Amundila there. I saw a Mike Katiba there. I saw, Nicholas Muliro there. I saw a few familiar names there. Maybe they think they are not really good enough at the moment. But I think for me, what I've observed in terms of the signings that they are making is that I think they want to refresh the side. They want to go with a few younger signings, if you like. I think they could be a good injection of pace as well in what they are trying to do. I don't know what happened to Buffaloes last season, but then my suspicion is that the trip that they took to Livingston might have, weighed too much on the players, and I think it disturbed them a bit. Sometimes the younger players are able to take the load a bit better. Sometimes the younger players are able to give you much more, and so maybe that is why they might be trying to refresh the squad. But the key thing is, do they still have a few senior players remaining in the squad to provide the spine and provide guidance for the young players? If the answer is yes, then we might as well back them in terms of the transfer decisions that they are making.
Okay, so the other thing is we have clubs such as Red Arrows, number one. We have Nkwazi, we have Prison Leopards, we have Green Eagles, we have Green Buffaloes, and I think these are five that are run by military institutions. So for these clubs, their goal is this: you get players, you give them jobs, and then when you give them jobs, they become soldiers or policemen and correctional servicemen
Officers.
and all of that.
Yeah.
So now, for me, I've been thinking about this the whole week. Do you think this system favors Zambian football, where a player, because the player is a soldier, they cannot be sold, they can only be loaned? Do you think that is an applicable system? A professional player, that just implies that once you get a job, then you are permanently a Green Buffaloes player. Then you cannot go anywhere without the authorization of the club. Do you think we need to detach the work and the profession of football, so that football becomes professional? You play football as a profession and not as a soldier. The soldier work, you do it when when you're not on the field of play, so that you allow players to go and be sold locally and
It's
not
yeah. It's an interesting scenario to look at. But then I'm reliably informed that a few policies are changing. For example, at a club like Buffaloes, that now getting permanently employed is going to be optional. It's not really going to be maybe compulsory, if I could say that. If that is a way that they are going to use, then I think it works well, because that is one of the thing that has made some of these clubs unattractive. Because players know that once they go there, then they are somehow locking themselves in, And even before they go out there local, they can only go on loan and things of that sort. It makes things difficult for them. Obviously, in their defense, Buffaloes are going to tell us that over the years they've allowed some of their players to even go outside the country, go and play. Chris Katongos, Nathan Sinkala, and a few others. But then the thing is that when they come back to Zambia, they are still the Green Buffaloes players, and the people in the high ranking sometimes may actually decide for them, where they should go and what they should not do. To answer your question, I think the best would be separating these two. If someone wants to sign as a professional player, let them sign as a professional player, and that is their employment. When they want to leave, let them leave. And at the end of the day, even Buffaloes themselves will get good funding for that. If they sign a young bright player today, gives them 2-3 years, he's wanted by some club in Europe. They make money out of it, and they go like that. I think that's a model that potentially could work. Those that want to be soldiers can be soldiers, the same ones that are there now. Those that want to join the club as professional players can remain as professional players, but just know how to manage the model at the end of the day.
But okay, I just want you to answer this one key part of the question. Do you think we need look? Nkwazi are offering contracts. Red Arrows offer contracts. Prison Leopards offer contracts. Green Buffaloes are the new team offering contracts. I think Green Eagles is the only team that is not yet offering contracts. So now, in as much as there are players that are being offered contracts and others are being offered jobs, do you think we need to detach this area of a job, because the player is employed as a soldier, so means that you cannot sell them. They remain a property of the club, of his parent club. Do you think we need to separate the two to say, okay, in as much as this guy is a soldier, but he can be sold, like you can just sell him off. He continues being a soldier, but not loan, not what? When he's sold, he's sold. Just like international transfers. Because when a player is sold to Europe, let's say Katongo goes to Germany. He went to Germany, the German clubs have rights to sell him off to another club that they want to sell. Yeah, what can only be added is a sell-on clauses and all of that in designing the contracts. But you cannot have control to say, okay, we are loaning him out for 5 years on a 5-year contract. Let's say a young Fano Maplanga who's just joined Green Buffaloes impresses is wanted by a club in Europe to say, okay, this guy is a soldier, so we can only loan you for 5 years. Do you think we need to detach that part of employment and professional football to say, okay, professional players should be run as professionally as it is done everywhere in the world? Because in the EPO we don't hear about such, because this guy is hired as a policeman where he comes from, so he's coming into the EPO on loan. You understand that?
Yeah, I do. So I think the policy at Buffaloes is such that I stand to be corrected. When a player is being sold externally, I think they are sold. Okay, they are sold, so they are allowed to go. They just take unpaid leave here. Okay, but then locally they give on loan. Do we have to change that policy? I think we have to change that policy, yes. But then, the tricky part is that, the other reason why they are enlisted as soldiers is that because when they are enlisted as soldiers, they can be used in other productive ventures. Okay, so you're not just going to be giving them a salary for free. If they're not playing football, they're going to be used in other productive ventures. But then a guy that signs today just as a professional, what else are you going to use him for? You get my point? So maybe that's why they still have that model. But the best case scenario is that we need to separate the two. Let professional players be professional players, purely football. And in some ways, I've seen certain players whom the moment they get employed, their level of output just drops on the pitch, because some of them, they get comfortable because maybe that's what they were looking for. But if we're going to start getting the most out of some of these players, I think we need that change.
Okay, so as we enter the final minute of this show, I think let me just talk about some transfer gossip that has been happening around throughout the week and the other week. So we had Musa Lemisa, a holding midfielder with the Lusaka Dynamos. He's been spotted in Mongu with Nkana FC. He's looking to close in on a deal with Nkana. We have a centre back from Butcon, Kanamuli Kapilimba. He's also with Nkana FC. We also have Hali Kayula, a winger from Lusaka Dynamos, who's joining Kana. We have also Elias Kabuswe, a young boy also joining Green Buffaloes. He's training with Green Buffaloes currently. We also have Clement Mulenga, who's training with Cabo Warriors, and a deal has already been struck. Personal terms have already been agreed. We're just waiting for final paperwork that is being readied, but the deal is as good as done. Then we have Lauren Moma from Forest Rangers to Power Dynamos. Then we have, you remember, Banda, who's joining Green Eagles. And then one last part is Pedro Miguel, who has been loan listed by Zesco United. So that one is the final. Pedro Miguel scored 14 goals in 16 games.
Is the final. Pedro Miguel scored 14 goals in 16 games. The National League.
And he's been loan listed by Zesco United. Your final thoughts about that?
Loan listed by Zesco United. Your final thoughts about that? I find it strange. I think you may have seen my clip this morning. I kept emphasizing on scouting. I think he hasn't been the fit that Zesco United were looking for, which I find unfortunate, especially for a big club. That I think they should have done better, maybe better scouting on the player, the qualities that he possessed, and if he was really going to fit in what they were looking for. So I find it a bit strange. I hope that maybe depending on where he goes to on loan, he can probably develop into the player that Zesco United are looking for. So that once they have him, he can be firing on all cylinders. But trust me, the money they spent on him, and if they are going to lose him for less, in case he fails to perform, then it would be a bad piece of business, really.
But okay, just a thought on Miguel Pedro. The thought is this. Miguel Pedro and Enoch Sakala are just one player.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So now it was difficult for Coach Numba to choose who to use. So for him, he went for Enoch because both players are offering basically the same thing with the team.
Yeah, but
So
look,
I may not
yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. They should have done better scouting in terms of what kind of player are we bringing in. Because if they already had an Enoch Sakala, I agree with you. They are similar players. You're not going to have two number 9s in a team. You know, you need one that is offering something different from them. That's what they complement each other. And so that's why I said, they should have done better scouting to know if he was going to be the right fit or not. Unfortunately, he has to be sacrificed, in a way. But hopefully, by the time he comes back, they would have developed a plan for him. Because surely you can't spend all that money and then begin to ship someone on loan just 4 or 5 months later on.
Okay. So your final thoughts about everything that has been said. Your closing remarks.
I wish the national team all the best as they prepare for COSAFA. I hope at this point we can all rally behind them. It's a need that we do well at that COSAFA. It could radiate good confidence going into the CHAN qualifiers. Beyond that, I hope that most of the Zambian clubs can complete their businesses before the season hits top gear, and also that as they make their signings, they should be trying to address key areas in their squad which they would have noticed as where maybe we're deficient. But then chief among all these is that all clubs are making improvements, because that's the key thing about transfer business. And we can't wait for the football to start. And I hope that this season's football is going to be a notch better than what we experienced last season. And beyond that, thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure. It's been an hour, 5 minutes, but it feels like it's 30 minutes. That's our game and its nature.
Yeah, thank you so much, Frank. It has been a pleasure talking to you. We live and love Zambia. We can talk the whole night. Thank you so much for accepting the invite.
Sure, cheers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.